and privilege to welcome you all to this event, the handover of the C7 presidency from Italy to Canada. And I'm extremely excited and honored to chair this event, at least the first part, in my capacity as C7 2024 Sherpa, where we'll be delving into what this year's C7 engagement has looked like, together with several voices and the help of different C7 steering committee members especially, but also some voices from the C20. Then my colleague Darren Seller-Perritz will take over from there. And we will have also the Canadian G7 Sous Sherpa and director of the G7 engagement in Canada, Mr. Martin Lajoie. And then we will close the event with a few words and closing remarks from our current C7 chair, Riccardo Moro, and then the CEO of Cooperation Canada, Kate Higgins. So just a few logistics before we will be delving into the substance. We are, as you are aware, we are recording the event. We will upload it to our C7 website, which will be online for a few days more. Then you will see the same website in a different shape as our Canadian colleagues are setting this up. But please be aware of the fact that all of the previous C7 websites will be embedded in the new one. Second thing, we have the AI translation available today, thanks to our Canadian colleagues. That's much, much appreciated. You will see, please have a look at the chat. You will have all of the instructions and the link to be followed to have the translation facilities in different languages. So you can make just your choice if you would like to do. And last but not least, we would love to make this event more interactive with some moments for question and answers. But as the lineup is quite rich and we have limited time, we are not so sure that it will be happen. So we are constantly looking at the chat in case you have got something you want to tell us. And we are really, really excited for an extremely rich discussion. This is a really critical moment for us to be active and engaged, and we are really pleased that you are using your time to come and hear about this with us today. So we really hope that you will come out of this with a bit more of a sense of what the C7 and also G7 process and policies are, and why it's important that the C7 members spread the word amongst each other so that we can really stay engaged and be influential. So that's what we are doing here. You are warmly welcome for the next just under 90 minutes. I will start with a few elements I would like to bring to this discussion and conversation, and also for the best use of the time and also the real sense of this event. And I would like to underline the fact that the C7 and in general the civil society engagement spaces are nurtured by a vibrant discussion. So this is really possible if you are part of this discussion, if you are active, if you can bring all of the main elements of your different agendas and expertise, and the collaboration is at the core of the C7, but also C20 and other civil society spaces. So we need to make this collaboration really at the center of the next engagement, and also in the future. And this is really possible if we can also bring local realities, of course, always underpinned by evidence and global voices together, and building on the interactive connection with the G7 and also G20 playing field. So the C7, as you know, is an independent process of international civil society from around the world. This year, in 2024, under the Italian Presidency, we had really numerous participation, more or less 700 organizations or networks, civil society from more than 70 countries. So indeed, with a real and concrete participation at global level. And this is essential. This is essential, especially because although the G7 is a club, a restricted club of a few countries, the commitments they make, the political discourse they develop, and also the approaches they adopt have an impact, a real impact at global level. So the main takeaways, let's say, and the main elements at the core of this process are the engagement and how we can reflect, indeed, the different voices from all over the world at global and local level, but also how we can be effective and really influential. And this is another element I would like to bring to the table today for us to reflect a bit more, especially based on our experience this year. We always say, and often and increasingly in the last few years, we say that the civic space is shrinking. And I can say that this happened indeed. We experienced it a lot this year in the G7 playing field, and especially in the dialogue with the G7 governments, and of course its presidency, the Italian one. So we consider an authentically multi-stakeholder process, decision-making process, but also policy-making process, particularly valuable, as it allows for a deeper understanding, also for civil society, but for governments as well, and enhances at both level of governance and strategic choices the work of analyzing and resolving the impacts and the determinants of the current polycrisis. We are in a very really dire time, and the perma crisis is a reality, and is of course a result of strategic choices, of strategic impacts and decision made, and how we shaped the political governance at global level. So having in mind and tackling the different aspects and determinants of the current crisis is key for us to be influential, but also is key to make the sustainable future a reality as well. So one of the other relevant element of this work we are doing together is exactly the holistic approach and the political coherence that we need to maintain and reflect also in our recommendations that involves, of course, all the sectors we need to make sure that all of the interaction and interconnection can be tackled this way. We always stated in the C7 process that the fact that the G7 needs to serve the purpose of the multilateral process, it can be very crucial and relevant in that playing field where all of the governments are represented and all of the countries have their space and voices. And this is even more relevant now, today, here, exactly because of the current polycrisis, but also plurilateralism we are experiencing. So while the G7 and G20 are increasing their power, also in the political definition, with a clear impact to all of the countries, we need to be more vocal in this sense. We tried this year, and I do believe that with our final communiqué and the vibrant conversation and work you did this year in the different spaces and working groups, we really reached this goal. So, as you know, we established 7 working groups tackling the different aspects of social policies, starting from global health, but also food justice and food system transformation. We brought also the discussion about the human mobility, but also climate and energy transformation. We enriched, if it's possible, the discussion nuclear disarmament brought by our Japanese colleagues last year, making the link with peace building and also common security. And we had indeed a discussion on principled humanitarian assistance, which is essential and key, especially during these current times and war and different wars and conflicts scenarios we are unfortunately experiencing. So maintaining this holistic approach and the policy and political coherence requires a lot of efforts, especially in coordinating the process, in bringing all of the voices, reaching the magic of being comprehensive, but also effective in in the different nuances you brought to the discussion. So this is indeed the most relevant element that I would like to underline today in this discussion as it is essential. Then we can say that as I mentioned, the space for policy dialogue, but also the space for us to be really influential was pretty much limited this year. We had an extensive conversation and discussion with the different G7 officials, but it happened only on closed-door meeting, not officially meeting. So this really matters. This is critical. This is an issue. We tried, but I mean, we find a lot of barriers, and you can see also the result of this exclusion, let's say, of the civil 7 engagement in the definition of in the negotiation of the G7 different ministerial meeting, but also in the G7 summit, even in the different communiques. It came up clearly. I would like to invite you, for instance, to take a deeper look at the final communiqué of the development ministerial meeting, which took place 1 month ago, at the end of October. And in that case, it's pretty much clear that the civil society in general, and even more local civil society organizations, are not part of the policy-making process. We didn't participate in the different meetings. We had just one occasion this year, very relevant, which was the G7 Employment and Labor Working Group. We participated in the process from the very beginning, and we also were part of the ministerial meeting as well, together with some others G7 engagements group. And also in the result of that ministerial meeting, and so that in the communiqué, you can see how the narrative, the language is pretty much aligned with our main recommendations and with our main elements, exactly because it was an ongoing and really participatory process, and it makes the difference. So our hope is that for the upcoming presidency, there will be more space for civil 7 engagement, not only in delivering our main recommendations, but also in reflecting those recommendations, and also defining and shaping the different policies with civil society at the center, and especially the most vulnerable at the center of the decision-making process. One more thing I would like to underline today is pretty much linked with the fact of with the fact that the civic space is increasingly shrinking and is paving the way for the private sector, especially to be involved and engaged. So this was another element pretty much relevant in the G7 development ministers meeting communique. The involvement of the private sector, of course, is not a problem per se. We are pretty much aware of this, but we are also really aware of the fact that it can be a relevant actor for the realization, implementation of interventions, both services, infrastructures, and so on, but it cannot be the author of policies. This is a role which needs to remain firmly in the public domain, with the public institutions which represent all of the citizens. This is what we can see actually at different levels and different fora and also institutional representations. But this is something we need to be not only aware, but if possible, more vocal to make our voice more effective. In fact, we worry that those and the population who are most left behind are only going to be more so with these new developments. And this is impossible, of course, especially for securing a sustainable future. Now I would like just turn the floor to my different colleagues sitting in the steering committee, so we can just have and collect the different perspectives on other elements which we are considering pretty much relevant in this process. And one of the main elements in terms of how we can better engage is the real and relevant role of the national platforms. We established this year a steering committee, to be honest, along the lines of what has been done even in the past from the previous C7 presidency, with the actually six national platforms representative of civil society. And I would like now to turn the floor to my colleague Sandra Martinson, representing BOT UK, member of the steering committee of the Civil 7, exactly to give us the sense of the relevance of the engagement of the national platforms during the year of the different G7 presidencies. So Sandra, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Valeria, for your really rich and thought-provoking introduction and remarks, obviously reflecting both on the G7 or C7 presidency, but I guess also more broadly, right? The kind of the political and policy space we are operating in. I think I'll probably start with that point, which I think resonated very well in your statement as well, as about that this engagement with our governments is not given. That policy dialogue is not given. And really, I share that kind of reflection, and I share that experience. What we, even in a UK, we experience. So, but disregarding, or despite, it is important, like Valeria, as you emphasized, and I think this is definitely something, I've seen, I think, the progress over these years since I've been engaged with this C7 process since 2021. And I think we are doing better in a more structured way, and as a whole, C7. And yes, I'll just share briefly, being asked for like 5 minutes or so to just share our experience, and maybe there's something for hopefully others to learn. So I guess maybe my there are kind of 4 things I want to talk about. So who, what kind of key moments, how, and so what. So with the who, so it's definitely, at least in our case, and again, it may be structured differently in other countries, but what we realized is that though the G7 and G20 Sherpa sit under the UK Prime Minister, so the Cabinet Office, it's really, really important as well to engage with the G7 thematic leads, policy leads, which sit, for example, in the Foreign Office of FCDO in the UK's case. So again, that was maybe something what we didn't do in so much in previous years, but definitely we've done more in this years, where we try to engage both parts. Obviously, the Cabinet Office, that's where kind of everything comes in. But it's really important that we have the similar conversations also with the policy leads, who essentially feed into what the really the G7 or G7 Sherpa would be kind of communicating, in the multilateral space. So that's the who. So that means there's a bit of, obviously, that means extra, there's a workload there, and then we'll also maybe sometimes, not sometimes actually, but there are also, other ministries. So for example, when it comes to some agriculture, which influences food systems and all that would sit in a different ministry with who actually don't really have a relationship, like, ongoing. So these are kind of the things I think we need to pick up if we want to engage on a really, substantive terms. So the next one is about the really the key moments, when that engagement is important, and what we also have been practicing. So first one is about C7 communique. As soon as it's out there, we have a very clear, tangible, piece of document. We can go and say, this is what global civil society wants, And again, I think this is also something what we have talked over the time, right? The sooner we have it, the better, because the more time and space you have for influencing. If we come too late with that, then they can take a note, right? But they maybe, as you maybe some may know, sometimes negotiations, they really take by topics, and once they have reached a consensus, they basically close the negotiation, right? And if on some of the topics you're interested, we come in too late, they will not open just because we want something different, right? So that's first one. So the second one is the summit, pre-summit, but also post-summit. It's also, and that's also what we have done, is engaging around post-summit, reflecting, sharing what we think about the outcomes, are we happy with what we are happy with, what we are not happy, and so on. And then I would say the third element is some of the critical ministerials, and like this year, the development ministerial, right? In when was it? October, yeah. That was a really important one, and that we also prioritized that, and we had a meeting. And the last bit is really about this moment when there is a handover of the presidencies, because this is also as well with the capitals. They are thinking, okay, what they're hearing, what kind of will be priorities, how they will interact with those priorities. Will they try to push for something, what's not on the agenda, how they will get engaged with that emerging new agenda, or what they will try to maybe what kind of legacy they'll try to kind of build on, of the previous presidency or so. So this is another moment when it's the dialogue, can be really impactful. So now about the house. So it's really, like I said, so first of all, it's really useful that we have, really clear policy documents, what we can really present to the government. So C7 Communique, I have found really a useful instrument to do that, especially if we can, say that this comes with a strong kind of global, support and endorsement. But we also have done UK specific policy brief. it goes a bit more nuanced. You know, it puts emphasis more on where we think UK particularly has a role to play, or where UK maybe is lagging behind, or where we think, you know, UK has a you know, sort of the has that kind of the leverage or expertise or power, you know, to maybe push some things forward, you know, and or where we feel like, you know, there's a really huge good potential for UK to play more leading role on something, you know. So that's is a complementary to essentially contextualize a little bit, you know, what is also in a C7 communique, or where we also know where their interests are, you know, because clearly they are not necessarily picking on everything, and they also have their kind of priorities. So that kind of pulling together that kind of document as well can be really useful. Then it's about obviously the meetings, you know, and over these years as well, we have tried to have these meetings, you know, around the communique when it comes out, before the summit, and around the development ministerial, and I'm hoping now to maybe get one now, or maybe early next year, around this presidency moment. So getting these meetings obviously not easy, you know, like I say, they are not given, you know, you have to ask maybe 5 times, you know, but you know, we need to keep asking, you know, and we need to keep asking. Usually, yeah, so that's the how, and the last bit really on the so what, you know. So it's a really relevant question, right? So sometimes I'm also reflecting, I'm wondering, so what difference all this is making, right? It's a lot of effort, and sometimes, you know, it's also really engaging members. And by the way, you know, when I'm talking about the bond and meetings and policy documents, I'm engaging members as well. So it's not just bond doing this, it's really collective work with those who are interested on agenda, who have expertise on, you know, agenda is huge, as we know, right, on a G7. So we need also the right people to also reflect and engage in those conversations. But there's obviously lots of disappointments about, you know, the progress, the speed, the, you know, quantities of different commitments, or no quantities whatsoever. Sometimes also the language as such is not necessarily progressive, and so on. But like in this year particularly, I would say that nevertheless, you know, we have had really, and that's obviously all this kind of closed door, and, you know, it's just between us, but like really rich and I think helpful conversations for both sides about debt, about tax, about food systems, investments, you know, policies, you know, and even though we haven't necessarily changed the way kind of how currently UK is seeing, I think engaging civil servants on those and SHEP office as well on those topics, I think it's helpful, you know, because we also need to understand that, you know, the whole kind of this policy world also sometimes is built around the echo chambers, right? We have our own echo chamber, but so they do, right? And then kind of stepping out and trying being comfortable, you know, to engage, you know, with people of different perspectives, and they do have obviously different also perspectives and things, can be really enriching. It can also help us to strengthen our arguments, you know, because we are engaging in the discussion, and it also helps them to be more nuanced, you know, about what they're proposing, and kind of the true impacts, you know, what their policies and positions have, especially if we are more kind of concerned from the international development perspective, and looking at how we really address these kind of more systemic issues, and less so kind of keen to engage in a debate around, you know, pragmatism, you know, playing the geopolitics and you know, doing kind of what is impossible, what is possible, right? But as we know, like it's big change makers, and we always need to believe in impossible until it becomes a reality, right? So on that note, I would also want to end here.
Thank you very much, Sandra, for giving us all of these input and the level of nuances which are truly indispensable to make our engagement also at national level with the G7 countries really impactful. who, when, how, what. I mean, this is really, really useful, and we are very much looking forward to continuing this engagement with all of your inputs and suggestions. Now, exactly with the aim of bringing, having just a more focused elements and reactions and also input from our C7 working group coordinators, we decided to have to bring to this discussion three main elements and perspective from three of the seven working groups. Not only because I mean these are of course relevant, but also because through this three perspective we can ensure, at least we tried, we can ensure the connection and the policy coherence will be part of our political agenda, especially our main advocacy recommendations. So we have now Maria Grazia Midulla, Civil 7 Coordinator of the Climate, Energy, Transformation and Environmental Justice Working Group, also member of the Steering Committee, just to explain and give us some elements of what happened this year and hopefully what next. Thank you, Maria Grazia. The floor is yours.
Thank you. Hi, everybody. I just I have just came back from Baku and UK, where we saw the result of our work somehow. Not very good results, but by the way, just to spoil as a spoiler. First of all, I think that we should underline that the approach that we have had this year was much more a sort of damage control approach on climate, just because we know and we knew that our government is very linked to the oil and gas company in Italy, Eni, and their plan are very much coordinated with them. And it was very clear in Borgo Ignazia, in the summit, where when there was a specific session with a bunch of CEOs. First of all, it was Eni and then the others. But and it was, the purpose was not very clear, but I mean the message was very clear indeed. And I think that we succeeded in getting our language in the text in the environmental, the ministerial environmental climate and energy session meeting, I mean, of the ministries. And although there was also some language we didn't like, for instance, the one on nuclear, in which the Italian presidency put also fusion, nuclear fusion, that as you may know is not something that we have available at the moment, and probably we will not being able of having available for at least 30 years. So it was like putting I said to the Canadian minister, it was like putting teletransportation in the final communique. And but apart from that, I think that the language was quite quite the main elements were there on climate and energy. Although there were also elements that we didn't like at all, and also especially the ones that were not in the open text. But I mean, of course, the commitment on gas infrastructures and other things went on the same. Also from Borgo Egnazia, from the main summit, we got something that we would have liked. And referring to the summit that we had, sorry, but Zoom is asking me what language I speak, but that could be interesting. But in the C7 summit, as you remember, the Sherpa came and we made some requests. Although she didn't answer, and we were quite upset because she didn't answer to the real beef. We must say that most of the requests were on the final text on biodiversity and on finance, climate finance. But of course, the way they were in the text, and especially the process, that is very important, I think, didn't make a big difference in Baku. And I think that my 5 cents for you is this: we have to see all the processes in a very coordinated way, because if we look at one process and forget of the others, that's completely wrong. And I'm not referring to the linkages between G7 countries action and then the UN summit, but I'm referring to the G20, who had a big influence on Baku from several points of view. First of all, the fact that the fossil fuel transitioning away from fossil fuels was taken away from the language in Brazil, influenced and facilitated the work that Saudi Arabia made also in Baku in order to take it away. And of course, it's not a country fault, because Brazil really did whatever they could. And that's also something that we should take into account. I have a large experience of G7 summit. I don't tell you the first year, the first summit, because I don't want you to know my age. But anyway, the problem is that I think that it's not only a matter of presidency. It's a matter of involving all the countries in the process, and maybe also not only the G7 countries, but also other countries, in order to have all the levers, available. So you think to G7, but you cannot forget the G20 and the very different dynamics that you have there, and that's quite complex to be managed, I must say, and I must underline this. So as civil society, we have a very difficult duty in the future, and in Baku we had, and especially after Baku, we had the feeling of the fact that also multilateralism is under attack, and so it's very difficult to defend the institution we have, and at the same time to try to make them work, because that's the real problem. And so I think that's something to think about. On climate itself, as you know, Baku is quite disappointing from our point of view, because the commitments made are not the ones we talked about, civil society. But more than ever, I think that the fact that the civil society united, all constituency, had to make some efforts to defend the multilateralism from not only from a presidency that was, of course, not that had probably not, an agenda that was not at all clear, but especially from the attack of several countries that at the moment are putting everything. They would like not to have anybody to say anything, although UN is not going the speed that climate change and the climate change and climate justice would require. I think that we have to better understand how to get the minimum, to get the maximum from institutions that now are delivering the minimum, but the alternative is to get nothing. Boy, that's it.
Thank you. Thanks a lot, Maria Grazia, for this relevant point you made. Of course, coordination and link among the different playing field is essential, but I would like to underline especially one of the points you made about the clear connection we need to maintain and influence, of course, between G7 and G20. And exactly on this purpose, we made this year, I'd say within the civil society official engagements group, quite a step, because we decided from the very beginning to have one coordinator for both the G20, the C20 and C7 on the economic justice working group, which means the finance track of the Civil 7. So Patricia Miranda had this relevant role exactly to strengthen these two process, at least on the finance issues. Patricia, please give us a few elements on what it worked, what we can implement better. Thank you.
Thank you, Valeria. Well, in the context and environment for engagement and advocacy for civil society that you and Sandra have shared, we also saw from our economic working group that there is an over-optimism, and we have seen this in several meetings of the G7, an over-optimism regarding the global economic situation and the results of the current business-as-usual policies. And all this, despite the multiple crises that we are living, which affects the most vulnerable people. So one of the things is that from CSOs, we still need to sound louder this alarm, to ring louder this bell of we are in urgency and we need urgently different policies. The Civil 7 has demanded to the G7, we have demanded an economic justice approach on key particular issues such as debt, taxation, trade, investment, concessional financing, for instance, among others, from an approach that could include and prioritize gender, climate, and human rights. As you mentioned, by this role, by having this role of being part of the C7 and the C20 at the same time, my view is that we have unified voices from across the globe, north and south and different regions, and we basically had the same demands in our communiques and in our policy packs in terms of economic justice in both, and the same demands for the G7 and for the G20. Among the challenges that I see is one is the reform of the global financial institutions, and it's good that the G7 and the G20 this year had the same call towards a review of quotas in the IMF, towards a quota realignment, including a new quota formula while protecting the quota shares of the poorest members. I think that is important, and this needs to be followed by the civil society in the next year, in the G7, in the G20, and in the IMF. Another important challenge is the role of multilateral development banks. The G7 supports the G20 roadmap on this, but in our view, it's not complete. It still needs more content towards protecting the public sector interests over private sector profit, and not the other way around, as we can see and feel in the lines where we can see the context of the contents of declarations. In addition, the risking public projects should not be a priority, in the same line of what I just said. And honestly, and from all the analysis that we have done, from billions to trillions has not worked in 10 years. So it is time to move on and be more incisive on other resources and other sources of financing, such as taxation, which is on track in the United Nations, and we expect that the G7 will be supportive of this process and this initiative. Also, other sources, for instance, like special drawing rights allocations that have been used as a no debt creation source for fiscal purposes, that after the pandemic have been quite used by Africa in the first place and by Latin America in the second place. The G7 and the G20 recognize that the solutions need to tackle not only low-income countries, but also middle-income countries' situation. And I think this is also key, that both have included this in several documents and declarations. And from CSOs, it would be important to see and to demand more concrete policies on this. For instance, the debt situation that is getting worse in the Global South, and taking more than 35% of fiscal or tax revenues every year. The common framework, the G20 common framework that is also supported by the G7, has proven that it doesn't fit for purpose. And it is very important to have a reform of the debt architecture in a multilateral space like the UN. This towards the much needed debt cancellation, debt resolution, and debt crisis prevention policies. All of this will be positive not only for borrowers, but also for lenders. So that is another challenge that should be tackled by the G7 in the next year. Another important topic is to move away from the GDP per capita to make key economic decisions for developing countries. This somehow is mentioned by the G7, and it is important to include other vulnerabilities that developing countries are exposed to when it's time to decide and make decisions on economic global policies that have an impact over the whole planet. This has been really more evident after the pandemic, that there are other criteria, ratios, indicators that could lead to better decisions. So this is another important point that needs to be followed next year. systemic changes still need to be addressed from an economic perspective, but also in listening to what happened in Baku. Yeah, it's sad, the low ambitious regarding the NCQG. We really hope that negotiations and the level of ambition at that the world needs in the next negotiation process that we have, which is the financing for development process, will work much better, thinking of really not leaving anyone behind. So to finalize the commitment from the G7 with more concrete and ambitious policies towards the achievement of the sustainable development for all and for all the needs that we have in terms of the climate agenda is both are crucial and urgent, and this is something that CSOs need to keep putting on the table with strength and also with louder voices. Thank you so much.
Thanks a lot, Patricia, for all of your inputs and suggestions. I mean, we took note, and we are sure that in our coordination and continuing process, we will define more vocal recommendations, but also, as you mentioned, we need to strengthen at both level, G20 and G7, our influence as well. I see one hand raised, but unfortunately not. I would like just to complete the round of inputs and perspective from the different working groups, and especially from the point of view of the political agenda of the C7 this year, with the last words from Francesco Vignarca, the C7 coordinator of the working group on peace, common security, and nuclear disarmament. I mentioned at the beginning how we took over from the C7 Japanese colleagues the attention on nuclear disarmament, but also during the current time and crisis, we opened also the discussion to peace and common security. So, Francesco, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Valeria. Good afternoon, everybody. Yes, as you just said, I'd like to start from the importance of the process. We had this first working group on nuclear disarmament during the C7, G7 process made by the Japanese colleague, and we decided to widen the focus. Not only talking about nuclear disarmament, which is a pillar of the building of peace, but also, talking about common security, which is a concept that really a lot of our organization and civil society group are thinking about, and of course, peace. And it's important to talk about peace, because without that, it's impossible to put into place all the policies, all the ideas, all the suggestions that we as civil society are making towards the leaders of the G7. Of course, the real compass for peace and disarmament is multilateralism. We tried to underline that in the communique, in the specific part of the communique 2024, and I read from that: the multi-layer crisis requires common resolve, strong international solidarity, centrality on human rights, international humanitarian law, a UN-centered multilateral process to firmly advance of the pathways towards sustainability, to address systemic issues, aiming at building open and resilient societies, bridging emergency solution with a long-term vision, stimulating change. I think it's quite strong what we said in the communique, and I want to underline also the fact that we worked a lot And I thank my fellow coordinators, Emily Molinari and Sean Conner from the International Peace Bureau for helping me in coordinating all the process with the contribution of so many people and so many organizations. And we tried also to link it with the humanitarian approach and what has been said in the humanitarian working group of the C7. Because without trying to intervene into the crisis and the conflicts and the wars, with the humanitarian approach, it's impossible to give the foundation for future peace. And we cannot talk about peace forgetting about what's going on in the wars nowadays. Not only the ones that are more in the news, specifically in the Western countries, like the Gaza situation, the Palestine situation, and of course Ukraine, but also the other wars that are not put under our eyes, but they are very, very problematic. So the key points, sorry, I'd like to add something more about multilateralism as a very open perspective of all our work. And I think we see it not only in the C7 communique that we issued some months ago, but even in the last press release yesterday regarding the Foreign Affairs meeting, which strongly underlines the importance and the necessity of multilateralism, and also in all the communiques also on this G20 process. We just talked about the G20, and I think that there are very important echoes between the two processes. What are the key points that we give to the Canadian friends and colleagues as a legacy, as a heritage for next year? I think that before going into maybe a list of key points, that even if our voices are more or less ignored by the governments, it's important, our process, because it underlines the crucial need for a real comprehensive approach. You know, when I read our communique from a person that works on peace and disarmament, I feel quite encouraged by the fact that my piece of work, my area of work, is linked with all the other ones, is linked with the healthcare situation, is linked with the environment, financial solution, the poverty agenda. That's important. And I you know, really want for you to take a minute to think about that. Even if governments are not listening to us, the mere fact that we are writing down a very strong and comprehensive proposal, it's crucial, it's important, it's fundamental. So I'd like you to praise yourself for all the work we have done in this issue, because I think that it's important for all our special areas of work and campaigns to know that there's someone else working on other things that, you know, engage a lot on what we are doing. And finally, I just want to give you some suggestions regarding what we made as a recommendation. Of course, in the common security area, we reaffirmed the support to an international order-based international law and the need of a global and regional peace architecture. We strongly supported the UN Secretary General new agenda for peace, which is a good summary as well, and ask the government to address the root causes of the violence and conflict, adapted to a holistic system approach. Of course, there's the interlinked nature of war, militarism, climate change, and environmental degradation. We have to put all the things into the same page, because otherwise it's impossible for us to do anything. And to invest in peace education and also support civil society and grassroots peace business is important. I've seen now in the chat that there's a suggestion regarding, of course, the hypothesis of, you know, suggesting some nonviolent civilian defense. That's something that we are proposing here in Italy. The Peace Corps or the civil Peace Corps are important, and it's a way to build up an alternative. At the moment, it would be really important just to you know, start the nuclear disarmament, or in general the disarmament thing, because otherwise, if the governments keep investing in weapons and in armies, there's no even place to think about an alternative. But it's a good suggestion, because if we want to invest in peace education, we also have to invest in peace opportunities, in peace ideas and alternatives. Of course, on general disarmament, we want to reduce military spending and arms production. And it's important also because we want to stress the multilateral approach. We ask the G7 countries to actively work for a fourth special session on disarmament at UNGA, because that is something that is missing since more than 30 years, and it's not possible to go on and on with continued wars without thinking about disarmament. And of course, in nuclear disarmament, we try to stress the urgency of nuclear arms reduction processes, which is something that also was, you know, not very strictly and firmly, but in a way reaffirmed also in the G20 leaders, the communique. That's all. I think that has been a really good and important exercise to do all together, to think about this kind of issues, which maybe can be seen as too complex, too problematic. We are in the midst of a climate of war, but only during the climate of war we have to think about what is needed to build a very positive peace. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Francesco. A lot of food for thoughts, and especially a lot of work to do. So while we will continue our conversation and discussion, actually we are running short of time, because as you can see, the vibrant discussion is always there. So I would suggest just slightly changing the agenda. As I see the Sous Sherpa, Mr. Lajoie already joined us. So I would like just to turn on the floor to Darren Seller-Peretz to set the scene for the Canadian C7 engagement, and also the inputs from this G7 Sous Sherpa. We will get back to our C20 colleagues just later on at the end of the event. Thank you. Darren, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Valeria, for your hard work today, but also your diligent work throughout the year. This year was really wonderful to engage with the Italian Secretariat and the whole C7 process this year. Indeed, I'm looking forward to hearing some remarks from our Canadian Sous Sherpa in a little bit, but I think first it would be useful to kind of present the Cooperation Canada's plan for the C7 presidency, and give a little bit of our vision and plan. So I'm going to share my screen quickly. Wonderful. I hope everybody can see our presentation. So I'd like to introduce myself. My name is Darren Seller-Peretz. I'll be acting as C7 Sherpa. I also have on the line the team that will be supporting the C7 process for Cooperation Canada. I'm looking to make this really impactful and effective year. So I also have Paul Farron on the line, who will act as chair, and Kate Higgins as the CEO of Cooperation Canada, who we'll hear from in a little bit. I also have on the line Nicolas Parent, as well as Andy Ouedraogo, who will support the coordination of the working groups. So I'd like to first start off by acknowledging, it's really important to acknowledge the land on which we will be conducting the C7 duties. For thousands of years, it has been the traditional land of the Huron-Wendat, the Seneca, and the Mississaugas of the Credit, and colonially it is known as Toronto. And today, this meeting place is still the home to many Indigenous people across Turtle Island and settlers on the land, and we are grateful to have the opportunity to work here. So we are going to set our agenda, set our plan for the year, talk a little bit about that, as well as hear from our Sous Sherpa, as well as as well as some closing remarks from the current chair and our CEO. So first things first, I'd like to hand the floor to Paul, who will kind of go over our vision and objectives.
Hello, everyone, and thanks, Darren, so much for those introductions. And huge thanks to Riccardo, to Valeria, to Dario, and all the colleagues on the Italian C7 for their work this past year. I'll outline just some key objectives and principles which in large part build on the excellent work that has been done these past years by Italy, by Japan, and all those who preceded. So firstly, we will continue, as done in the recent past, to lead civil society from G7 countries to put forward a focused, coherent, and hopefully impactful advocacy aiming to influence policy both at the leaders and the ministerial levels. And we are fortunate to have a very solid starting point in building on the 2024 C7 communique. In doing so, we will also coordinate Canadian civil society and support in convening with other G7 engagement groups, and really aiming there for complementarity in our advocacy. We will also continue to play the role of interlocutor for C7 priorities to the Government of Canada, and therefore aim to maintain this open and transparent communication with engaged stakeholders. And I wish to highlight here as well the excellent and open relationship we have with the Sherpa, the Canadian Sherpa, and her team at Global Affairs Canada. Excuse me. We will also aim to provide inclusive space for meaningful engagement of global majority partners in C7 working groups, as well as at the C7 summit, recognizing that those critical perspectives on G7 policy decisions and linkages to other bodies, such as the C20. And here we will really aim to leverage the networks and expertise of our counterpart CSO networks throughout G7 countries and globally to ensure this diverse representation and perspectives. With regards to conducting our advocacy, we will continue to work closely with Global Affairs Canada in aiming for civil society inclusion in various G7 processes, including at ministerial meetings, press conferences, briefings, as well as at the G7 Leaders Summit. And as mentioned, we'll continue to cultivate these open lines of communication with the Canadian G7 Sherpa team, and likewise encourage CSO networks and organizations from across G7 countries and beyond to do the same as we coordinate our advocacy. And here, of course, our C7 communique will provide us with that foundation we need to conduct this advocacy. So we will very much be building on the excellent work done by the Italian C7, as well as other points of reference, such as the Brazil-led C20, in working towards hopefully a tight and concise set of policy recommendations. We're aiming for a maximum of an 8 to 10 page C7 communique, which will focus on delivering actionable policy recommendations and address some of the global challenges that have been raised in this first hour of this call. And finally, we're going to work to coordinate in the space more broadly in terms of advocacy coherence with other multilateral instances and events throughout 2025, including Canada's leadership of ECOSOC, the South African-led C20, FFD4 processes culminating in Spain, and beyond. So I just want to conclude by stressing here that we're very much building on the excellent body of practice that's been built by past C7 leads, and to thank Italy for continuing to build these solid foundations in 2024. So thanks for your attention, and Darren, back to you for more details on our approach and next steps.
Thanks, Paul. So something that really lays the foundation of our relationship with global affairs and with the G7 team is really a document that we have provided to them on how to, kind of good practices to engage with multi-stakeholders, including non-state actors. And so this document that we put to them had kind of 4 overarching priorities, but really laid the foundation of how we saw as a productive relationship. So this was really inspired by work done in the past by partnership with both the government of Canada as well as the UNDP. And like I mentioned, this is really the aim of this is to guide our relationship and contribute to the representation to non-state representation in the G7 process. And it's really, this includes, developing a clear plan, facilitate active non-state participation, openness and transparency in sharing information and in processes, as well as, providing adequate funding in order to conduct these activities. And so from this foundation, really, we're looking to I'll get into kind of some of the elements, let's say, of what a C7 presidency entails. So we are, of course, going to be, the whole C7 presidency will be guided by a steering committee composed of, the G7 country networks, some partners from global majority countries, that I think Paul mentioned that link with the C20 is crucial, and so that C20 representative as well as Indigenous representative, which is so crucial to bring that perspective as well to this international process. And so the role of the steering committee will stay largely the same, to provide strategic orientation, guidance on advocacy, coordination with the C20 and other 4 as well, and coordination with share that intelligence with that these country platforms can bring from their discussions with their own respective Sherpas and Sherpa teams. And so on the events, I'll have a timeline on the next slide, but overall, obviously the big events are the handover that we're doing today, as well as our C7 summit, which we are aiming to have in person in Ottawa in early April. And so obviously more details to come on that end. And so at the C7 summit, obviously the goal here is to really validate the communiqué and really present this, these global civil society priorities to the Sherpa team in Canada and to the world as well, in order to, have these important priorities appear in the discussion, in the G7 discussions on the agenda, and have meaningful impact. And so this communiqué will be produced by working groups. And so these priority themes of these working groups were decided kind of from a balance of many different, priorities, obviously. And so this, from, global civil society priorities, as well as continuity from past C7 presidencies, as well as, some of the priorities that the government of Canada have already been discussing, as well as, Canadian civil society priorities. And so the working groups will be, climate, energy and the environment, economic justice, humanitarian action and peace, and sustainable development. And so in this sustainable development is, I see appearing things like, global health, things like nutrition, food security, and things like that. And so within these, priority themes, we'll also have cross-cutting themes of democracy and civic space, gender equality, and evolving technology. And so to populate the participants in these working groups, we'll be really leaning on our G7 country networks to, invite some of their in-country partners that have thematic expertise on all of these things, but also some of their global majority partners that will bring, crucial perspectives as well to the discussion. And so, if we look at kind of a timeline from today to the end of our presidency next fall, we're looking to bring forward, we're looking to organize four steering committee meetings, as well as 2 working group meetings, and the C7 summit, as well as the G7 summit, obviously, is very important. And I mentioned earlier the composition of the working groups. Given that we'll probably have around 25 participants per working group, but we'd really like to engage the broader C7 ecosystem, and we think that a great opportunity to do so would be really during having an information webinar as a chance to kind of pose your questions and discuss the progress that we've done so far. And so moving on to some of our communications and outreach, I think that it's really important to disseminate this information and to connect with interested parties. And so just to amplify the work of the C7, and so just to kind of present what our website will look like. This is, of course, we have the Italian website up until the beginning of December, but then we will have our own website as well as our Civil 7 logo, which really brings out a few things. So we have that continuity piece with the dove that represents peace, which is one of the things that we obviously strive for, as well as part of the Canadian flag as its wing, also representative of the mountains where the G7 summit will be hosted in the mountains in Alberta, Canada, as well as the belly and the beak of the bird, signaling C7 there. And so that is the branding and the logo that we will move forward with. So seeing at the time, I really want to hear from our Sioux Sherpa and his remarks. But I wanted to thank you for your participation this year and your active participation for the year to come as well. We'll be establishing the steering committee, convening the working groups, and really planning the C7 as our next steps. And you can always reach us at this email. Right now, it's still under the Italian stewardship, but it will be passed over to us shortly. And so on this, I'd really like to introduce our Canadian Sioux Sherpa, Martin Lajoie, who was appointed director of the G7 G20 Summits Bureau and Sioux Sherpa at Global Affairs Canada in May of 2024. Prior to this appointment, he also worked within government on climate change and biodiversity. And his career at the Canadian government also includes years of service at the Privy Council, Finance Canada, and Natural Resources Canada. So, Martin Lajoie, the floor is yours. Thank you so much. I think we don't hear you. Am I the only one?
No, we cannot hear.
No.
Yes.
We can hear you.
Oh, you can hear me now?
Yeah, it works. It works.
Excellent. Okay, I just had to disconnect from the system. So good morning, good afternoon, wherever you may be. It's a pleasure for me to be here today, joining you from the unceded territories of the Algonquin Anishinaabe, known as Ottawa-Gatineau here in Canada. Thank you, Don and Paul, for this overview of Corporation Canada's plan for the C7 presidency. I would also like to extend our appreciation to the Italian C7 team for their hard work and dedication. Clearly, your efforts have made the 2024 C7 process a resounding success, including producing an impactful communiqué that supported the overall G7 policy dialogue. As you know, Canada will be hosting the G7 Leaders Summit in Kananaskis, Alberta, mid-June 2025. And you can expect that Canada will be advancing common priorities, such as building economies that benefit everyone, fighting climate change, and managing rapidly evolving technologies, as well as with a focus on gender equality mainstreamed across priorities. Still recognizing that we're still under the Italian presidency as it continues. It just concluded yesterday the G7 foreign ministers meeting. As you know, we will have, or I can expect we will have more to say very soon on our presidency in the near future, as we will take over on January 1st. As we think of our year and our presidency, I think it will come to no surprises to you that we, as we are thinking about our agenda, we're still to confirm the number of ministerials meeting we will have, and some of the key focus of our agenda. But navigating the rapidly evolving geopolitical landscape has always been a key focus of G7, and I expect that it will continue to be a top priority. With that said, we're certainly excited to work with our engagement partners, such as Corporation Canada, as well as the Canadian Lead for Civil Society 7, toward the realization of the C7 summit in 2025. Staying true to our G7 principles, we are certainly committed to supporting development, as well as addressing climate change and inequalities. We're also ensuring participation of the Global South will be an incredibly important piece to shaping our agenda. I should note as well that gender equality is a constant priority for us, and we'll aim to integrate this into our work. We'll also strive to create synergies and align across broader international cooperation efforts, including the 2030 agenda, the Financing for Development agenda. Additionally, we'll aim to coordinate with overlapping initiatives and other multilateral platforms, such as G20. So in January, the Sherpa will host a call with all the engagement partners, including Corporation Canada, where the Sherpa hopes to be able to share more details about Canada's G7 agenda. And then so with that, I'll conclude my remarks. Again, I just want to take a moment to thank the C7 Sherpa Valeria Emmy, as well as the C7 Chair Ricardo Moro, for their hard work and effort throughout the Italian C7 processes. We are excited to continue our collaboration with Kate, Paul, and Darren, and the entire team at Corporation Canada, as we prepare to support them to host their upcoming C7 summit in Ottawa, and we certainly look forward to strengthening our partnership and and contributing to the success of this very important dialogue. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Martin, and I really appreciate the meaningful engagement that we've had in the past few months with our GAC team, GAC counterpart, global affairs counterparts, but as well as the continued engagement that we hope to have for the year to come. So Valeria, I'm not sure what because we changed the agenda a little bit. I'm not sure if you wanted to kind of go back to some of the C20 remarks, or because we are at time, maybe go into the concluding remarks.
Yes, actually, we have just realized that our esteemed colleagues from the C20 are not here. I mean, they had some problems, so just we can turn the floor to Riccardo and then to Kate. Sorry for the delay. We are trying to make up for it. And thanks. Over to you, Darren.
Yes, so even though these our C20 colleagues are not here today, we do still, envision close relationship with the C20 and close coherence and coordination with them, of course. It's too bad that we couldn't hear their remarks, but I look forward to hearing what Riccardo, as current C7 chair, has to say, and then Kate, you can come in. Thank you for staying a few extra minutes to our participants. So Riccardo, the floor is yours.
Yeah, thank you. No, just a few words. First, saying that I was messaging during our meeting with Alessandra and Manla, and I greet you all on behalf of them. But we have some members of the C20 networks, like the same about Patricia, Claudio, Aoi, that are here sharing with us the meeting, sharing the membership of the two processes. And just a few words first, thank you all for your participation. Thanks to all the members of the working groups. Thanks to the coordinators. Thanks to the national platforms. Let me thank you also the Italian network of GCAP Italy that work very, very, very strongly with us, sharing the responsibility. There are also many people that helped in the process without being seen. And let me thank also Andrea and Dario. Andrea is the person who helped us in all the organizational work, and she is with us in the meeting. Dario helped us in the communications, and I can't end this responsibility without thanking Valeria. You all know what is the value of her contribution to our process, and so again, thank you, Valeria. Just one word, there is a concern about our effectiveness. A lot of people spoke today about our effectiveness, and I think that if we look at the short run, maybe that we think that we are not effective in our work. But if we look at the long run, as Maria Grazia was saying, there is a sort of change in the culture that and in the language of decision makers that is the result of our work. But this is not enough, and there are strong concern around the growing violence in the world, in wars and in facts, the growing wars, even the growing anger among the people. If you look in the social networks, the tone of the comments of the post are always angry, and I think that we have to face the possible degeneration of that violent climate, and this has to be one of the key elements of our attention. That's the reason why it is very important to maintain the peace, the reflection on peace at the core of our work. And I think that it is important in that perspective to strengthen our links. That means to strengthen the link in the work we do we mention a lot of time the relation between C7 and the C20, and this is something that will continue, and this is very important. I think that we have to put in our perspective also the dimension of BRICS processes, and all these processes, of course, have to converge in the framework of United Nations. So one of the elements that our friends from Canada and our friends from South Africa in the 7 and 20 civil process will have to put in place, and so also to help us in creating opportunity to have links together. And when we were organizing this moment, we said, oh, we are not leaving space for discussion. And in fact, we had some question in the chat, but no the possibility to speak. So one thing that we said is that in the next months, maybe in January or February, it could be interesting to have a common moment shared by C7 and C20 for a big open dialogue, not linked to specific steps of the G20 process, of the G7 process, of UN. But I think that it's important to have an open space to speak together. There is a new framework that has been created by some friend of us, like Anselmo and Ahoy, that are with us in the meeting. That is this GS Watch. It can be helpful in creating this opportunity. Let's use that to have the opportunity to with a good space and a good time, with enough time to speak together, to reflect together. I think that our responsibility as Italian civil society is ending now. I'm not anymore the C7 chair. I'm the former C7 chair. I'm even be a little bit emotion for that, of course. And thank you again for all your help. And yeah, the C7 process led by the Italian civil society is over, and it is in the hands of our Canadian friends. And thanks to Canadian friends for what you will do at the service of the international global civil society. That means at the service of the most vulnerable among us. Kate, you have the floor.
Well, thank you so much, Riccardo, and thank you everyone for a really wonderful handover discussion. I would also like to sincerely thank Valeria, Riccardo, everyone who engaged so actively in the 2024 C7. It is a huge amount of work and coordination, and we are deeply, deeply grateful for all the hard work you did, but also for the approach that you're taking to ensuring the transition to the Canadian G7 and C7 leadership is really strong. We will continue to push and build on Italy's amazing work and the 2024 C7's incredible work, to do everything that we can to ensure that the G7 in Canada in 2025 has the outcomes that us as a global civil society and as a C7 so deeply believe are necessary for a fairer, safer, and more sustainable world. We will be doing everything we can to ensure this is an inclusive process that really does engage and involve and center the voices of the global majority, the voices of Indigenous people in Canada, and the voices of those that are on the front lines of defending civic space and pushing for civil society action and engagement around the world. We know that 2025 in many ways is a big year in the global space. It's the 50th anniversary of the G7. We will be 5 years out from the 2030 agenda. There are a number of global replenishments. It's Beijing plus 30, the Commission on Women's Rights, Gender Equality. We are going to have a really important COP in Brazil, where I know that our colleagues from the C20 in Brazil are going to be working really hard and fighting for strong commitments on climate action. It will be the G20 in South Africa. So a really important moment for strong African leadership and African engagement in the G20 spaces. And we do this all in a context of really deep geopolitical uncertainty, ongoing wars, conflict, immense humanitarian needs, and really, really challenging strains on the multilateral and global system. So we will do everything we can to engage and connect those different global processes and really ensure that we're engaging with all of you and centering the voices and perspectives of civil society. There are a few other ways that Canada is showing leadership on a global stage. Canada has the leadership and presidency of ECOSOC in the UN system, so we'll be looking to make those important connections. We also know that next year is a really important financing for development meeting in Spain over the summer. And there are a number of elections happening around the world. And I think it's also important for all of our global colleagues to be aware that in 2025 in Canada, we will be facing a federal election. So we will be navigating that political climate and potential political change in 2025. So with that, I would like to thank everyone for your engagement, for your really hard work. I would like to express our commitment as Cooperation Canada to work very closely with you to make strong connections with the Government of Canada and the G7 Sherpa team, and be doing everything we can to really ensure that the priorities of global civil society are really at the forefront of the outcomes of Canada's G7 presidency. So with that, I will close. I would like to thank just one last time our colleagues in Italy and all of you who engaged so tenaciously and in such a dedicated way on the C7 in 2024. So back to the host. Thank you so, so much.
In my quality of a former C7 chair, may I ask everybody to open the camera so we can have a picture all together to record at this moment? Thank you very much. So Dario, you can go on taking pictures of the screen.
And let us know when it's done.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's done.
Thank you, fellow advocates, colleagues. It was such a pleasure, and good luck to Darren, Paul, Kate, all of the team in Cooperation Canada, and see you soon.
Thank you.
And count on all of us, of course. Bye.
Bye. Happy holidays.
Thank you. Bye.
Arrivederci. Good night, Aoi.
Bye bye.
Bye bye.